great gratitude for the steadfast way in which so many of you have understood that one of the ways to prevent a next war is to continue to tell the truth about the wars that have plagued so many of the people in your own family lines, and the wars that afflict us, and the wars that we must stop for the sake of the children in our midst. I'll make just a slight confession. Life running along, maybe as much as it does, I have a bad habit of reading reviews about books and never getting around to reading the actual book. And who has time to read a novel these days, as so many of us are trying to quickly expand what we understand about Afghanistan, about Pakistan, about the ways in which United States military technology is moving in frightening new directions. And so, I just want to tell you 2 lines from a book I haven't read, but 2 lines that have haunted me so. The book is called Lark and Termite by Jenin Phillips, and she describes a Korean veteran, a person who had gone to the war in Korea as a U.S. soldier, and he's utterly war-weary, and while he's over in Korea, he misses his lover, he misses his loved ones, and he says, the planes always come, like planets on rotation, a timed bloodletting with different excuses. May I say that again? The planes always come, like planets on rotation, a timed bloodletting with different excuses. At the end of January, I stood on the corner of our back porch where I live in Chicago, and I heard a plane going overhead, and I thought, oh, I'm hearing a plane, and I'm not clutching and bracing for the bomb to fall. And that was a luxury. And it was a luxury denied to the people I had just been with in Gaza. Do you know, on the last nights of that bombing, every 11 minutes a bomb fell. From 11 at night till 1 in the morning, and then again from 3 until 6. And can you imagine Yusuf, who had welcomed us into her home, when she thought there was a lull? She thought she could relax. She sank down in a chair and she said, you cannot imagine the fright that I have felt for all these many days. But when I was back in Chicago on my back porch, hearing the plane with the security I'm so accustomed to, already that lull in the bombing had ended. When it seemed that it was safe to move, some very brave and fine university students accompanied us to go to Gaza City. And they were stunned, even the driver Nabil, a really tough fellow in so many ways, looking at the wreckage on both sides of the road leading from Rafah, C Street, on up to Gaza City, was very stunned. He said, even the coffee shops, they have been bombed. And the wreckage was so severe, we went to kind of retrieve books and papers belonging to Bashar from his dormitory room, which was filled with rubble and broken glass. And then we went to the Shifa hospital. And I met a fellow who grew up in Lakeview in Chicago, 1 neighborhood away from me. Said Abu Hassan, who'd grown up to become an eminent surgeon. He can do emergency room medicine and ICU medicine. And he came from the Emirates because he wanted to be of help. And he started to tell me about the very extremely unusual kind of medical work they were doing. Teams of doctors, vascular surgeons, neurosurgeons, orthopedic surgeons working together. They would bend over a patient and he'd find that he had to leave the room because his lungs were filled with an odd fume and they weren't quite sure what it was they were dealing with. He said that the kind of dense inert metal explosion bombs, that apparently was what he was describing, would lacerate arms and legs, limbs above the joint. And then I asked him, well, can you tell me, what should I bring back to Chicago? I live not far from the neighborhood where you grew up. And he said, well, of course, say that the people in Gaza are going to need prostheses and they're going to need rehabilitation clinics. And then he stopped himself. He said, I am completely wrong. Just you go back to the United States and say, the Americans paid for these weapons. I said, I'll try. We went to visit the head of the burn unit and plastic surgery, Dr. Nakba. And normally my experience of meeting with medical doctors is that they're quite cool and calm and collected, and I'll tell you, this surgeon, an eminent surgeon, was shaking. He was shaking with anger. He was shaking with a certain amount of confusion. And he started to tell us about the nightmare that they'd experienced as they were working in an emergency room where people were dying at their feet in pools of their own blood. He started to tell us about how they really weren't even sure what exactly the weapons being used were, and then he took a phone call. I was so impressed. He took a phone call from a farmer from the area around Tufa. And it happened that one of the people I had traveled with, we were just a two-person delegation, really. We walked in behind the New York Times and the LA Times, and for some reason the American Embassy let us in after we'd been out camping for a week in the Egyptian side of Gaza. Anyway, my friend Audrey had gone off to Tufa that morning, and she came back with pictures on her cell phone, and she said, you know, the orange groves were all uprooted by bulldozers after all of the farmers had been told to evacuate, and every single house was dynamited, and people were really scrambling, trying to pull their clothes out from under the rubble or save the oranges. So Dr. Hafiz Abu Shabab took a call from a farmer who said that the workers were out trying to salvage as many of the oranges as they could, but their hands had begun to itch, and all of the oranges had a very foul smell. And so the doctor put his head in his hands. He told the farmer, really, we don't know all what was used against us, just to wash your hands very carefully and to be very careful distributing those oranges. And he stopped the call.